The following is a conversation with Anna Wang, CTO, and Shegun Otulana, CEO of Copysmith. Copysmith is the AI copywriting platform built for e-commerce teams and creative agencies. Copysmith uses GPT-3 for copywriting in e-commerce and marketing to generate, collaborate, and launch quality content at lightning speed. If you're interested in GPT-3, make sure to subscribe and check out our GPT-3 manual book for O'Reilly. This is Sandra and Shabam, and we hope you enjoy this interview. Shegun, Anna, we are really curious always about the sort of the background story of every company that we're talking with. And in Copysmith, I believe you have quite some interesting story of the founding of the company. Can you kind of go with us through the behind the scenes of how Copysmith came into being and why did you come up with this idea and so forth?
Sure. So I can talk briefly about this, Shegun. How does that sound?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Cool. So Jasmine and I co-founded an e-commerce store a couple of years ago now. So that was June of 2019. It was in a Shopify e-commerce store. We were selling earrings to a pretty niche target market at the time. And, everything was quite beautiful. We had these beautiful photo shoots. We had beautiful Instagram captions with poetry and all the right hashtags and whatnot. But the issue was we really didn't know how to sell. So both Jasmine and I are not from marketing backgrounds. I'm much more of a technical person. And trap that technical people tend to fall into is, trying to explain, the technology or the product, but not saying, this is why it would be useful for you, the user. So what happened is we didn't have good call to actions. We didn't have a way to convert a potential customer from checkout to actually, purchasing. So suffice to say, this just kind of utterly collapsed and we didn't pursue anything for quite a while. And as we both know, in around June of 2020, that's when GPT-3 came out. We initially used this for more creative pursuits. I was playing around with poetry. Jasmine was doing character voices, trying to emulate characters in books and seeing how GPT-3 could adapt to those spaces. And then one day we realized, actually, maybe if we had this tool when we were trying to build this e-commerce store, if we could have sort of shaped it to fit call to actions, for example, or product descriptions, we would have been able to at least get it off the ground. So we built up an MVP, launched it on October 26th on Product Hunt, and had a very surprising initial sort of user onboarding. Just tons and tons of people were interested. I think on that first couple of days, we got something like 1,400 upvotes. And on Copysmith, that's considered, on Product Hunt, that's considered pretty viral. I think anything beyond 800 upvotes, you can say, oh, that was a pretty successful launch. So that's sort of where everything began. From there, we just iterated, continued talking with users. But yeah, I would consider that the sort of founding story, starting from a failed e-commerce pop-up store to, online web platform for everybody.
That's an awesome founding story. Shabam was saying the same thing at the same time. Sorry.
That sounds very interesting. Yeah. So Shegun, Anna, that's a really interesting story. But if I have to ask, if you have to describe Copysmith in your own words, how would you go about that?
Sure.
Anna, you take this. You're the creative, poetic one. Go for it.
Ooh, okay. Time for me to find the best words for this. Copysmith in my own words. So something we like to toss around internally is Copysmith enables users to create content and to deploy that content anywhere on the web 100x faster through powerful AI. So allowing people to be able to write faster is our chief priority. And alongside that, building in tons of integrations to all the platforms you can think of with Google Ads, WordPress, for example, we have 2 Shopify integrations, just allowing you to create content really creatively, get into past that brainstorming writer's block that so many of us run into, that I run into all the time, and being able to just like in a snap deploy it wherever you want it to go, reducing the time you spend.
Nice. That's a very neat description of what Copysmith is. Shegun, I see you unmuted yourself. Did you want to add anything?
No, I think that's perfect. The goal for us is to really accelerate content development and the distribution of that content anywhere you need it to be. That's really the goal.
Yes, we want to be the best content creation platform out there.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So actually, content is quite a broad term, and it can encompass both, creative, artistic endeavors, marketing endeavors, everything that sort of happens online. So we're also curious who Copysmith is for. Who is the end user of your platform?
We are built for marketers, especially e-commerce marketers and publishers and internal marketing teams and the agencies and organizations that serve those people. Just like the founding story has this e-commerce influence, the product itself is the best out there when it comes to e-commerce solutions. We have more integrations with e-commerce platforms than anybody. We provide the best product description and e-commerce AI writing tool out there. So that's a large area of focus for us. And then we obviously work with publishers to also deliver content solutions. So those are the people that we are designed for. We are designed more for marketers and e-commerce solutions more than, say, creative writers or science publications or things like that. We can serve those people too, but I would say our primary area of focus is around marketing, especially e-commerce marketing.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Yep, that makes sense. So as we know, right, Copysmith is built on top of the OpenAI API. Can you guys talk about what were the reasons behind using GPT-3 for building Copysmith, for building this product?
Sure. So the first thing is GPT-3 is extremely flexible. And the second thing is it's just by and large the biggest, well, at the time, at the very least, biggest language model out there. So I think it was something like 470 times bigger than BERT large. So that was one big thing was, my brain definitely went, this is cool. This is huge. This is the biggest AI tool out there. I want to see what what we can make of it. And the one difference, especially that it had that was made much better than BERT was that it was so flexible. So BERT requires pretty significant fine-tuning processes. So you have to go in, you have to feed in a data set. You have to make sure that it is attuned to what you want it to do. GPT-3, because it's trained on such a bigger data set, you can basically frame it in whatever way you want to without needing as much AI knowledge as you would need for a different platform. So that's the thing. It allows you to iterate very, very fast without needing to have much prior knowledge, which makes it very easy to develop on.
Mm-hmm. So I actually want to follow up with one question. Feel free not to answer if it's beyond the scope, but I'm curious because it sounds like you're quite well versed in the large language model territory. And for example, you mentioned BERT compared to GPT-3. How did you come up? That's my curiosity with GPT-3 in the first place. Was it you were looking for a model to fit the purpose that you had in mind before, or was it kind of hand in hand?
Sure. So like I mentioned before, right, we sort of started out with poetry. We started with creative writing. So both Jasmine and I happened upon GPT-3 in Twitter space. So I was one of the first 20 or so users, I believe, in that private beta, back when they were creating personalized private fine-tuning engines, person by person. So you would get your name inside a drop-down to fine-tuned engines because there were so few people using it. So this was back when I just wanted to experiment. I was building tons of fun little side projects at the time, and I wanted to try out what is this new shiny API that's out there. So I'll say we started playing with the model for other purposes, and then realized it could be generalized to this e-commerce tool that we would have imagined so long ago. Does that make sense?
Cool. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We are always curious how did that happen, that this appears on the radar of a startup and somebody is brave enough to decide to go for it. You are actually, I think, even like the one of the earliest users that we were interviewing. nobody before said that there were these like tags with your name next to the model, because there were so few users. That's really cool.
Yes.
So I'm curious, like, as we know, this is like a super new thing on the market right now, that there's something called model as a service, that you're able to utilize API in order to interact with this powerful model to create a new product. And we can imagine that in such scenarios, it creates quite some challenges. You have to go through quite a journey to arrive at the place where you're happy with. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like, what were the challenges, and whether you overcome them or not, and why, whether you're still working on something?
So challenges associated with using a model as a service, or
with using GPT-3 per se, because we're the most interest that we have currently is GPT-3.
Sure. Shegun, do you want to take this, or should I?
I think you are bound by the limitation of the provider, which is OpenAI. You do have to give up a little bit of your own entrepreneurial, what would I say, like your vision of, hey, this is what I want to do with this product. It's kind of limited by what the underlying API can do. So that's one limitation. There is a slight loss of control. That's another limitation. Your progress is in essence limited by OpenAI's progress. So those would be the biggest challenges, honestly. But from a technology standpoint, it's very easy to use, and I think we all know that whatever is easiest for the engineers wins in the market. That's kind of the game. Whether it's Twilio, whether it's Stripe, and OpenAI is kind of winning on that front right now. But you're still limited by the level of progress, in the same way that you're limited by what Stripe allows you to do if you're doing payments, or what Twilio allows you to do if you're doing telephony software. So that, I would say, that's the biggest thing.
Yeah. And I will say that this is not necessarily something we hold against OpenAI. Like, we work pretty closely with OpenAI as a team. What we're concerned about is safety, is whether or not you can generate harmful news articles, for example, and put them on the internet and think, okay, and have people perceive it as true, because GPT-3 and your whatever like prompts you're using are just so good at creating human-like content. So we also want to ensure that anything we produce is safe. But as Shegun said, this comes with limitations. You have certain character counts. I'm sure, as all API users, you probably have chatted with, also are encountering with, you only can have a certain amount of characters per template. The kind of templates you have, for example, are limited. So yeah, for us, it's been a process of very open, clear communication with OpenAI, ensuring that everything we do is mutually beneficial.
That makes a lot of sense. So following up on that, like you said, like you work very closely with OpenAI. Like, do you guys actively collaborate with OpenAI on how to improve the API response for your specific use case, or are there any tips and tricks which you can use that can optimize the response for your use case? Do you collaborate in that kind of fashion with OpenAI?
We do. So we do consider OpenAI kind of an extension of our own team. So OpenAI is extremely helpful. We have shared channels. We talk pretty constantly with the team to discuss use cases and brainstorm. Like, we have this vision, our entrepreneurial vision, as Shegun would say. We have our product roadmap. What do you think are some technically feasible ways to implement this? So this is something we do. with the more long writing, for example, that we've been seeing coming out recently, we have a smart editor. We work with OpenAI to ensure we have those safety guidelines nailed down with news and whatnot, making sure that we're not generating spam. So this is, like, as mentioned, a very open conversation, and we do talk pretty friendly.
Cool. That sounds good. So coming back, I guess, to we have started a little bit to talk about other models than GPT-3. We mentioned BERT, and next to BERT, there are other models out there that are open source currently. So we are also always curious, because as a startup, you have a choice either to pay for the API per calls, or maybe you want to experiment with some open source thing. Have you looked at other models out there, and what are the outcomes? Or maybe if you haven't, why not? That would be interesting to know.
Yeah, sure. So we have tested some models, not necessarily entirely open source in the sense that, like, we have proprietary data sets and ways that we have tweaked them. So we have worked with a proprietary model besides GPT-3. I think the main thing that makes GPT-3 so good, as Shegun mentioned, is that it's super, super, super developer friendly. The fact that you can just interface with a model through an API and have a team who is, like, often just answering any questions that you toss their way is really helpful. And the difference with a proprietary model, for example, is that you have to put effort into hosting them on whatever platform you're thinking of. So I think that's why we have realized that actually it may be better for us to stick with something like GPT-3 for at least the short term until we go to a size where experimenting with other models is necessary. Shegun, thoughts?
Yeah, the other thing we found with the other models, especially the open source ones, say like a GPT-J, is that they are very powerful. I actually think it's great that they're there. I think they work very well within a narrow set of solutions. So let's say you're focused on e-commerce, or you're focused on SEO, or you can really nail down just one particular use case. They can be very powerful from that standpoint. But if you want generalized writing, the OpenAI brain is just much larger. So that's the biggest difference. So we will continue to use and experiment other models. We're not going to close ourselves out to our own proprietary models or open source tools. You just have to use the right tool for the job, depending on what you're trying to do for the customer. Ultimately, it's the customer's needs that drives the decision. So
yes. Oh, Shegun has been a good point that I didn't think about here, which is about that generalizableness. Because as mentioned, BERT is much smaller than, like, GPT-3, and it requires much more of this fine-tuning process. And it's generally the same for other models you'll encounter. One fun note maybe we can talk about is, like, GPT-4 is, I think I read this on Medium, so don't quote me yet. You will need to fact check, but it was something like 1 trillion parameters or something, which is insane. So I think that could be interesting to look into later, because I'm not sure what the implications of this are. Maybe it'll be even more flexible across a bunch of use cases, but we'll keep an eye out there.
Yep, totally. We too are very curious about GPT-4, even though there isn't much concrete information out there. But yeah, people are making speculations.
Yes, lots of speculation.
Yes. So coming towards the end, like our last question to you guys would be, like, what's the word of advice or the words of wisdom that you want to give to other people who are looking to create a product with GPT-3 as a backbone? Like, what are the important things to keep in mind when somebody is looking to build and scale a product using GPT-3?
Okay, this is a really good question. Shegun, what do you think?
don't compete with us. No, I'm kidding.
Yes.
No, I think it's still early days. So there'll be a lot of solutions built around this, and I'm really curious how the market evolves over time. So just make sure you're solving a real problem. You're solving a real problem. That's really what it comes down to at the end of the day. So
Yeah. Something that is not necessarily Copysmith specific, but I always think is just like how you build a startup is don't fall into your own biases. Don't fall into the limits of the technology and think about your user. Because especially, for example, with GPT-3, one of the easy things to fall into is, this safety guidelines page has these particular use cases and these particular limits. And then you build within those limits without trying to be creative. So really, it's up to you. Apply your creative spirit. Think about ways to serve your user in a way that not necessarily constrained by what's out there for GPT-3. Think beyond that. Think about how you're going to serve your users' needs and just build an awesome product. That's what we're trying to do.
That's an awesome founder-to-founder advice, I would say. But I guess also what we're looking for here is that people reading the book will have much less experience with GPT-3 than you guys have already.
Okay.
And looking back at how you learned sort of how to navigate with it, how you learned how to not end up in some pitfalls and waste time there, would you give yourselves at the very beginning of this journey some sort of advice on how to, build this product better, faster? I don't know.
Sure. I guess we can talk briefly about GPT specifically. Just like with every model, your outputs will only be as good as your inputs, generally. And by inputs in this case, I don't mean what a user types into your platform, for example, which is what happens with us. I mean prompts. So keep a very close eye on what exactly you're feeding in. Don't remove spaces in front of your prompts. Remove those straying apostrophes or punctuation mistakes. Those little things will show up and they will degrade quality. So I think it's really easy to let that slip by. So put it in Grammarly, put it somewhere, get it fact checked. And I guarantee you will have a much better experience because it's like when you're developing or you're programming. It's these tiny little bugs you don't have that just keep popping up. And yeah, just feed it into something, get it cleaned up, and I guarantee you'll get better outputs.
Awesome. That's very commonsensical and good advice. I think also true to our experience as well. Alrighty, I guess we reached the end of our questions for today. Shabam, do you have anything else in mind for today?
No, this is good. Oh, I thought you said Shegun.
Shabam, Shegun.
Yeah, because you guys have names that sound similar. I meant Shabam.
Nope, nothing from my side. Just like thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for giving your time and talking to us. It was very interesting, very insightful to know about you guys, especially your journey of how it started. That was very interesting. So thank you so much for taking out time to do this.
100%.
Yeah, we really appreciate your openness with us, and I feel like we learned a lot every time we speak to companies. We learn something, and we definitely learned new things talking to you today. So thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you for having us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you so much.